Going to speak very long at all. I think most of you know I'm the chair of the Hanover Limetown Dems, and I have worked over the years really closely with students at Dartmouth College. And especially after the 2016 election, a whole bunch of people who were terribly upset about Donald Trump being elected were quick to say, oh, we need to do X, Y, and Z, imagining it wasn't already done. They would say things like, well, we need to organize the Dartmouth students. And I'd go, no, you don't. The Dartmouth students are organized. And so part of this effort is just to share with folks who are interested information about the depth and the range of what Dartmouth Democrats do. And so I am going to simply turn it over to Miles. There will be time for questions at the end, and you can either put them in the chat or, I don't know, Miles will perhaps tell you to raise your hand, but I'll let him do that. So thank you so much, Miles.
Yeah, thank you so much, Deb. Excited to be here with you all tonight. We have a great panel of student speakers. I kind of threw this on everyone last week and was like, guys, we're going to come to the Upper Valley Dems meeting. We're going to talk about what we do. And everyone was eager to jump on board and take on this project. They've all prepared remarks on different aspects of what the Dartmouth Democrats do, what we do during our meetings, how we try to engage students and get organized. So you'll hear about a wide range of topics. Like Karen mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we take a lot of pride in the work we do. We believe it's important. Maggie Hassan won her race by 1,017 votes. That's our favorite statistic as Dartmouth Democrats. That was actually my iPhone password for a while, but I bragged to too many people about it that I'd started to worry about my own cybersecurity, so ended up having to change that. But 1017, we cannot forget that. We have a crucial election coming up in 2022 to send Maggie Hassan back to the US Senate. I'm sure everyone is well aware of what is going on down in Washington, D.C. right now, and we cannot afford to lose any more Democrats down there. So hopefully a lot of the work that we're doing and that we're going to talk about tonight is going to help achieve that goal of sending Senator Hassan back and electing Democrats up and down the ballot. Something we've been talking about a lot this week is local races and how important those can be with the Free Staters and that coalition of the New Hampshire Republican Party. And even right here in Hanover, with our own school board, a lot of issues are being fought at the local level. So we want to organize and engage students on issues that impact the entire country down in DC and issues that are going to impact local students right here in Hanover. So with that, thank you all for being here. Thank you so much for joining the call, Deb. I appreciate it. I know you got a lot going on, so feel free to hop off at any point, but I am going to turn it over to our first speaker in a moment to talk a little bit about, just give an overview of what the Dartmouth Democrats do. So Claire, if you want to take it away, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Miles. I'm Claire. I'm a sophomore at Dartmouth, and I'm just going to give a quick kind of overview of what we do on a weekly basis. So pretty much we meet every week on Monday evenings. We're going to have a meeting tonight for about an hour, and the nature of the meetings varies and it's pretty dependent on kind of what's going on. So sometimes we focus on advocacy surrounding bills in the New Hampshire House of Representatives or State Senate, which some other people will get into in more depth later. And then we often hear from speakers about ways to get involved with New Hampshire or national politics, or just more general discussions about their careers and issues in their fields. And we've been fortunate enough to hear from speakers such as State Senator Melanie Levesque and Senator Maggie Hassan. And then around big election times, we also do some canvassing and campaigning, and people will also get into that more in a little bit. And then another thing that we do that's very important is kind of holding discussion spaces in reaction to national issues or events that are happening on Dartmouth campus, just so people have a place to have their voice heard. And then at the end of each of our meetings, we have a Dem of the Week where one of our members can present a member of the Democratic Party that's been influential or very important to them. And that kind of reflects some of the more social or fun aspects of our club, as well as some social events throughout the term to promote bonding. And then I think Kelly was going to talk a little bit about presidential primaries.
Hi, yes, I'm Kelly. I am a senior at Dartmouth. And I think one of the things the Dartmouth Dems do best is running our campus outreach when there's presidential primaries. So we were lucky enough in 2020 to have almost every Democratic primary candidate come to campus at least once, which was really fun and exciting. We talked to the campaigns, depending on the stage of the campaign, it's the campaign manager, sometimes the operations or advanced team to help organize those events on campus. That's mainly the job of our executive director, who's right now Sophia, who focuses on the outreach part. And then the day of the event, we will be there. We got really good in 2020 staffing these events. We managed the line. We organized people going into the events. We help the candidates with whatever they need from our side, helping with Dartmouth and setting up the venues. And then we also do outreach to all of campus, letting people know these events are happening. A lot of times we use our email list to send out emails to campus, giving details about these events. We'll let people know at our meetings. And if we're tabling about something in the library, we'll let people know too, who come talk to us about the events going on. So I think that pretty much summed up, yeah, like I said, almost every Democratic primary candidate came to Dartmouth, which was really cool. So yeah, I think that's the main things about primary events at Dartmouth. And also a lot of times we get to a group of the active members of the Dartmouth Democrats will get to meet one-on-one with the candidates before they speak. So we get, or not one-on-one, but in like a small group setting with like 6 of us. So that's a really cool opportunity to get to like ask questions. And yeah, so that's a cool part of it. The Republicans and the Libertarians, I think there might have been 1 or 2 Republican candidate events in 2020, but it's not the same sort of operation that we had going on at all. So yeah,
I'm also going to just insert myself and say that this was something that we really emphasized with the campaign reps in the area before their visits, because they would try to do things independent of the Dartmouth Dems, and we would constantly say, no, you go through them. They know what they're doing. Stop recreating this. It was really very impressive to see the work that you guys did, and I thank you.
We had a good system down there.
Thank you, Deb.
So now I'm going to pass it back to Miles to talk about involvement with the community.
Oh, perfect. Okay. I was going to cut you off there, Kelly, and mention that we should have everyone briefly introduce themselves and their role before they speak, but I guess I was the next speaker anyway. So I'll say, I'm Miles. I'm a junior at Dartmouth, currently serving as president of the Dartmouth College Democrats, though I should say co-president now. We are in the middle of an election. Polls close at 8 p.m. tonight, and Kelly and I have decided to run as co-presidents. We're currently unopposed, so fingers crossed there's no insurgent write-in campaign that is happening unbeknownst to us. But yeah, and then maybe I'll pass it back to Kelly and Claire if they want to introduce themselves quickly before I go.
Oh, like mine's just too sweet. I don't know. I feel like you just covered it, Miles. But before, I have just been this year, like we've called it the senior advisor, just because I've been around for a while at this point and I know how things work and have some institutional knowledge. So I have stayed involved that way, and I'm looking forward to be co-presidents with Miles this winter.
Yeah, I'm Claire. I'm a 24, so a sophomore at Dartmouth, and I'm currently serving as the policy director of Dartmouth Democrats, so kind of identifying different legislative tasks for us and things that we deem as important, and organizing testimony around that, which I think someone is about to talk about some of the stuff that we've done in the past.
Okay, perfect. So I will speak a little bit about our involvement with the community before passing it off to Rachel. We've done a lot of work, as both Deb and Karen mentioned before, with local Democratic organizations right here in the Upper Valley. speaking for myself, I know I serve on the executive board of both the Hanover Lyme Town Democrats and the Upper Valley Democrats as well, and have definitely gotten a glimpse into local organizing that way. Something I got involved with around this time last year when I took over as president of the College Democrats. Whoever the president of our organization is always has a seat on the executive board of those two groups so that we can talk a little bit about what's going on campus with students. And it's, a really great working relationship that we've built over the last few years. Obviously, students are capable of doing a lot of great organizing, but sometimes we rely on our Democratic counterparts in the Upper Valley, in Hanover and Lyme, and towns like that to help us out when we're in need of assistance on some sort of projects. They've definitely been instrumental in helping us stay up to date on certain issues. I know if I happen to miss something that the Kent Street Coalition puts out or something from 603 Forward, Deb will always flag that and make sure that students are organizing and able to advocate for or against certain bills. We do a lot of work with our local elected officials and state representatives to make sure that, if there's ever a need for students to be vocal on an issue, that we can do that. Obviously, I'm sure people are aware of some of the attempts made by Sununu and the New Hampshire Republicans to restrict student voting rights, but we have been very active on those issues. Just a few years ago, before most of us were students here, there was a lawsuit to prevent HB 1264, a voting bill that would have introduced new complicated rules surrounding New Hampshire driver's license requirements and tied them to voting. Ultimately, those bills did not pass. Some students, in conjunction with the ACLU, were able to stop those bills from getting anywhere. But I can tell you guys that it definitely scared a lot of students away from voting. It created a lot of confusion on campus, which some can argue was its ultimate goal. As Deb just mentioned in the chat, we've done a lot of work to advocate for issues as they come up, have worked on op-eds, talked about student housing. Senator Prentice and I helped advocate for students to be eligible for vaccinations. There was some confusion this time last year as to whether or not out-of-state students would be able to get vaccinated here. Obviously, I think we all thought it was ridiculous that they were going to be withholding vaccines from people who needed them, especially college students who were going to be active on campus and potentially a source of spreading the virus. It was very important to get those students vaccinated. So yeah, I've done a lot of work on a whole host of issues. Eternally grateful to Deb, Karen, and all of you guys, the town Democrats and Upper Valley Dems, for helping us out, and excited to continue working with you guys in the future. I think that's a pretty good overview of the working relationship we've had over the past few years. But now to get a little bit more in depth on some of the specific bills and issues we've advocated for, I'm going to pass it off to Rachel to talk about the testimony we did on Zoom last year.
Yeah, hi, my name is Rachel Horn. I'm a 24 and I serve as the events coordinator for the Dartmouth Democrats. So one kind of offshoot of the club is the Legislative Advocacy Task Force. And so something that we did last year was we all testified to oppose a bill in the House that was going to infringe upon student voting rights. And it was very easy to kind of galvanize the club to testify because it was a student rights bill, but I do hope that we will do more of this work on kind of all sorts of issues going forward. But the way we kind of went about this was we all met on Zoom and kind of talked about what components go into effective testimony and how kind of we could really appeal to the representatives. And then we all split off and worked on our own testimony and then came back together and peer edited and worked and collaborated on that. And then we all virtually attended the session. I've yet to go to one in person, but I really would hope to soon. And yeah, we all gave our testimony. And I think we all found it really a powerful experience to be directly speaking with our representatives and to be exposed to the legislative process in this way. And then kind of in a more similar vein is that in meetings, we do a lot of letter writing campaigns and making phone calls to our elected representatives. And I think having these activities as part of club programming is a really good way to ensure that the very busy college students really do carve out time to stay politically active, because a lot of these things are things that we could do on our own. You know, we could all write letters and make phone calls, but it's really important that we all come together and do it as a collective. One, because then, you know, a group of people sending the same message is a lot more powerful, and also it really just makes sure that it gets done. So yeah, that is all that I have to say, but yeah, I hope that was helpful.
Sweet. Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate that. I think our next speaker is Gabby to talk a little bit about what we do online and on social media.
Yeah, thanks, Miles. I'm Gabby Rodriguez. I'm also a junior, and I've worked as a communications director for the past year and a half. So our main platforms that we use are Instagram and Twitter, and our main priority is to just amplify progressive issues in the state and across the country. And similar to what Rachel was talking about, we've really used our social media following and presence to talk about letter writing, ways to successfully testify, especially when we were virtual at the State House, which allowed for a lot of us to really get out there and talk. So we right now have around 1,200 followers on both Instagram and Twitter. I would say I use Twitter the most, and we frequently tweet about voter registration, injustices that are happening in the state and across the country, bills, especially bills that we want to get passed. So like we talk about House bills that we want to testify in opposition or for, and we include the steps to testify. And I could show, I don't have screen sharing, but recently we just tweeted about House bill.
Add screen sharing capabilities if you wanted to show.
Oh, well, I'll send the link in the chat. So this is an example of what we tweet about. And we say, we support House Bill 1053 to ensure employers pay time. And we talk about why that's important. And then we include just how to sign on. So our main priority is just to make it very accessible for college students and for other Upper Valley residents that want to show their support. In addition, we use a larger hashtag, hashtag New Hampshire Politics, which connects us with the greater New Hampshire other accounts as well. So that just gives us like a virtual portfolio if you click on that hashtag, and you'll see all of our work. So I think that's about it. We just hope to engage our Dartmouth community and the greater Upper Valley in our legislative work and amplify issues. So, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, and then we included the link to one of our tweets. We work a lot with the New Hampshire College Democrats, the broader organization of campuses. So that tweet comes from that account, but we amplify a lot of that on our personal account as well. So thank you, Gabby. I think next up we have both Gabby and Sophia speaking again a little bit about the work we do with other progressive organizations on campus. So I'll pass it off to you guys.
Hi, everyone. My name's Sophia. I'm a 24, which means I'm a sophomore at Dartmouth, and I'm the current executive director of DEMS, and I have been since the beginning of last fall. So I'm going to, again, like Miles said, I'm going to speak on DEMS collaboration with other on-campus progressive groups. Our partnerships with other clubs typically revolve around collaboration on a certain event or mutually encouraging new members to attend each other's meetings. For example, we have really strong ties to Dartmouth's chapter of Planned Parenthood Generation Alliance, which is like the pro-choice organization. I kind of serve as a bit of a liaison between our groups. I try to attend as many of our meetings as possible. Jordan, who's also on this call, attends way more than I do and also fills us in. Basically, all just to figure out how we can support their efforts or where we might benefit from working together. So for example, last term, pretty early on, DEMS coordinated students attending the Lebanon Rally for Reproductive Justice. And members of PPGA came and protested alongside us. We were able to like give them rides to the event as well. So our partnership with PPGA is somewhat restricted given that they are technically a nonpartisan club, but that doesn't like stop this kind of like unofficial collaboration between our groups. We've also worked with the Dartmouth Women in Law and Politics Club in the past. Last spring, we worked with their executive board to co-sponsor a speakership. Saru Jayaraman from One Fair Wage, advocating for a $15 federal minimum wage. And again, they are somewhat limited in their official capacity to partner with us because they're nonpartisan, but we do everything we can to ensure that Dems are efficiently working with other organizations to achieve mutual progressive goals. I'm also going to pass it to Gabby to briefly talk about our relationship with the campus Republicans.
Yeah, so in the past, we have tried to work with the campus Republicans for Get Out the Vote events, essentially, as we all know, where they stand on voter registration and getting out the vote. They're not as favorable in that sense. So we have turned to Student Assembly, there are student government on campus, so they're all elected officials, and we have partnered with them to really encourage voter registration drives, the last of which happened in February of 2020, actually when I registered to vote in the state of New Hampshire, which is amazing, prior to the primary. So since voter registrations are nonpartisan, which someone mentioned earlier, we don't get to officially sponsor them, but we have really encouraged and provided the resources and the connections that we have to our student government, and tried to also speak with the Republicans on campus to no avail. We also have worked and spoken with the Young Democratic Socialist activist group on campus, the YDSA, and that's been more recent following the protests that happened this past fall when Madison Cawthorn and a few other conservative speakers came to campus. We released a statement in opposition, calling for people not to attend and for them to cancel their event, essentially. And the YDSA hosted a protest, which we didn't co-host, but we actually just spread the information to our fellow club members. So that's just a little bit information about our connections with the other political affiliation groups on campus.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Appreciate that. And Jordan, if you had anything you wanted to add just about your involvement with PPGA or other groups, feel free to do so. Don't want to put you on the spot, but thought it might be nice to put some other perspective.
Sure. More recently, we've helped, or I don't know, to some degree, some of our members, we have been involved in signing on to this initiative ourselves, as well as putting it out there, helped with the student dining workers to help get them a union, which the college has said they're going to officially rule on the 28th, and we're going to see what happens from there. But even if they rule no, there might be further things about having to unionize each department thing individually. And I've been working with PPGA. They're doing a lot of stuff this term as well with making a newsletter. Last term, we helped, or at least we spread their reproductive news sheet, which had reproductive resources and where to get safe abortions. And I'm also a hub coordinator at Sunrise Movement, which is a progressive climate activist organization. We might be organizing some things later in the term, and we'll probably work together on that.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that, Jordan. Alrighty, next up, we have Josh to speak a little bit about our work with college Democrats on other campuses in New Hampshire, and a little bit about our fundraising efforts as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Miles. So I've had various roles with Dartmouth Democrats, New Hampshire College Democrats over the past couple of years. Currently, I'm coordinating job and internship opportunities for people at Dartmouth and outside. Was previously the finance director of College Democrats, helped organize some events in Hanover and around the state that bring people together. Currently doing some political work, following up on a lot of really impactful work that Kelly and Ariana Khan did last year in terms of legislative advocacy. So with College Dems, we kind of do everything that Dartmouth Dems can't do on their own. A lot of that is financial. So for example, when the Shaheen campaign came to us in the summer of 2020 and asked to run an ad about Corky Messner's business defrauding college students, we couldn't do that in our official capacity as Dartmouth Democrats. We could, as New Hampshire College Democrats, took the opportunity to loop in students from other schools, get testimony about that, how electing him as senator would be directly harmful to people and college students, especially within the state. We spend a lot of time looking to get access to other college students at other campuses that don't have nearly as organized of a presence as we do. I understand that we're working towards getting a base of students and faculty and staff actually at Colby Sawyer interested in building up towards the type of organization that we have. At the end of the day, that does all take a lot of money. I saw that Martha put in the chat a question about Republicans and libertarians, and Jordan's response to her is totally correct. But if you ask me for like one piece of comparison between the other political groups on campus and us, I would say that they're completely outside funded. Turning Point USA sponsors every event that the Republicans do. The Libertarians benefit from a lot of individual support from outside donors, which doesn't necessarily come in through the Campus Libertarians Club, but frequently through like the Dartmouth Review and other third-party organizations or through outside funding of speakers. What we do is completely different. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's grassroots, but we definitely rely entirely on the support of the community and people throughout the state and country, alums, neighbors, friends, to support the activities that we do. That ranges from the things that I mentioned with New Hampshire College Democrats, but even just expanding parts of the jobs that we do on campus. So when beyond, I mentioned the advertising, that's great. But when we have events on campus, a lot of the times our outside support pays for food, helping create like more meaningful relationship with the people that come on campus. And to be completely honest, we leverage those relationships when it comes to crunch time. We're really grateful for having them, and we can't do that on the shoestring budget the college gives us. We're not very different than a lot of other democratic organizations in terms of how we spend the money. We do have costs like food, gas, literature, but we're really nimble, really efficient. And like Upper Valley Dems, which you all know I'm very familiar with, I would say your marginal dollar and donation goes really far with us. Not here necessarily asking you to donate, although I will drop the ActBlue link in the chat. But if you know people who see the work that we do with voter registration, with turning out college students at levels unlike any other school in the country, then their money, their support in any way, cash, in kind, whatever, is really, really appreciated.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Josh. Obviously a really important part of what we do is being able to include all students and make sure that everyone is able to participate in the advocacy we do. I know there was a question that came up earlier in the term about going down to the State House in Concord to testify for some bills in person, and students were asking whose car we would borrow, how we would pay for gas, if we would be able to get food, and a lot of logistical questions come up that are made so much easier by a few small donations. So like Josh said, not necessarily asking you to donate, but if you happen to pass the link around or know someone who would be interested, we can always use the extra money. So appreciate that. Next up, we have Prescott to speak a little bit about our working relationship with the New Hampshire High School Dems. So I'll pass it off to you, Prescott.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Prescott. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm originally from Claremont, New Hampshire. So I am a Upper Valley resident all throughout high school and coming up to Dartmouth as a freshman. But in high school, I was a part of the New Hampshire High School Democrats, and in our work, which consisted of chapters all throughout the state, we worked closely with the college Democrats in order to work on our legislative agenda, and also in volunteering for different candidates. We worked together in order to create a student branch of Senator Shaheen's re-election campaign last year, and also tried to get free tickets for events before COVID, so that college students and high school students were able to attend the different party fundraisers, and working pretty consistently with kind of lock in step, especially when it comes to legislative advocacy. Specifically last year on House Bill 544, but there's currently not a chapter of New Hampshire High School Democrats in Hanover, but Hassan's current Senate page is currently a junior, and she's coming back to Hanover and is going to start a chapter. And so we're hoping that Dartmouth Democrats will be able to work with Hanover High School a little bit more in the future.
Definitely, yeah. During the pandemic, when we re-upped our social media efforts, pulled a lot of inspiration from the New Hampshire High School Dems Instagram page. Their designs and graphics were all very aesthetically pleasing. And obviously the work they were doing was very important as well. So hopped on a few Zoom calls with them in the early days of the pandemic and got to collaborate on a lot of cool issues. And yeah, like Prescott mentioned, looking forward to doing that again in the future right here in Hanover once we get a chapter started up at Hanover High School. So excellent. Next up, we have Riley Gordon talking a little bit about the work that students are doing in the State House.
Hello everyone. Nice to see you all. I'm Riley. I was president of Dartmouth Dems back in the day, I think like fall of 2019 and winter of 2020. So like presidential primary season, you know, in the olden days. I ran for state rep myself as a younger man in 2020, younger man with a little more joie de vivre than I currently exhibit. So you've all heard a little bit about how Dart Dems tries to make Dartmouth students' voices heard in the political system, especially in state politics, where we're very involved. So in the district we're in, with 4 state reps, students are about a third of that population, and Dartmouth Dems have been invested in making sure that students are represented in the State House. A student in the State House, it's a good conduit for student political activism. And it's a great reason for Dartmouth students to get out and vote, even if there's not necessarily someone that they recognize at the top of the ballot. Although Dartmouth students are generally pretty good voters because of all the organizing that we've talked about earlier. So yeah, so there are like some narrow reasons that the Dartmouth Dems organization has an interest in having a student in the State House. There are lots more benefits that we don't necessarily have to discuss here. But so there were grand plans in early 2020 for canvassing and getting students to register for absentee ballots, which fell apart for obvious reasons. But Dartmouth Dems were very involved in my campaign with phone banking and social media, graphic design, peer-to-peer organizing. Actually, I and everyone else that helped me out with my campaign combined, we made the most calls through Van of any state rep primary candidate in New Hampshire, or at least on the Democratic side, because who counts those other guys? And you know, students in the State House have been very productive in the past as well. I know Garrett Muscatel, former state rep, living legend. He proposed in just his 2 years, I think, a total of 9 bills. He was the prime sponsor, I think, of 9, and the co-sponsor of several more. So he was very productive. And some of the students and grad students that are in the State House as well are prolific. But even if there's not a Dartmouth student in office, we've still got ideas that we'd like to see our elected representatives pursue, and we let them know that for sure. I'm sure Mary Hecken Phillips can attest to that because I've pestered her over email about some of those things. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt a second. Riley, you actually helped write a lot of the legislation that Garrett proposed. And it's my understanding that you are actually helping write bills with Mary. Am I wrong about that?
I did help Garrett write some of the bills that he proposed. I did not write the bill that Mary proposed, but I just brought forth the idea, and it was like I didn't do the actual bill drafting like I did for some of Garrett's. But yeah, with Mary's bill, I just sort of brought forth the idea and I basically pitched it to her, and it's not looking like it's going to go through at the moment. There's still some, you know, some more background and legwork that needs to be done before it is going to be successful, but I still have high hopes for it, and I'm going to be involved, hopefully, in talking to the people who need to be convinced. Oh, yeah, I can, sure. So with Garrett, I helped him draft okay, it's been a while. I worked with Garrett on a couple of his bills to create study committees. One of them was for civics education, and the other one was about and the other one got rid of some kind of like I forget the word, something that like drug manufacturers coupons, that's the word. Drug manufacturers were giving out coupons to people so they wouldn't have to pay copay on, expensive drugs, except it came back to bite people in the end because those drugs were far more expensive than the generics. And so insurance paid a lot more for the generics, and the price of insurance paid a lot more for the prescription drugs, and price of insurance went up. So that bill helped to lower the price of insurance. I drafted a carbon tax bill that replaced some existing language. I helped out with Garrett's insulin cap bill, and Mary's current one would encourage solar developers to make their fields into pollinator habitat. So just all sorts of good stuff.
I want to also say that Riley joined Team Prentice after the primary, and I really, really enjoyed working with Riley, but also that I thought it was a real demonstration of leadership because, when you don't win an election, it can be a difficult experience. And Riley was just as committed and really jumped into it. And I thought it was really outstanding. So I just wanted to give some public props to Riley for the way that he handled the last election and for the work that he did to help get Senator Prentice elected. So it was good to see you, Riley. I hope you get your joie de vivre back.
Thank you, Karen. I'm really just here for the public adoration. So
nice.
Awesome. Well, I can say that Riley is certainly excused. We were both at the gym pretty early this morning. Actually, maybe it wasn't that early. It was like 11 o'clock, but that's early for me. I ran into him there, so maybe we're both a little bit tired out from that. But thank you for speaking about all the important work you have done with Garrett and that students are still doing and continuing to do down in Concord. Always cool to check in on different legislative priorities that our group and other college Democrats are working on. I think we have our last topic up next before we open it up for questions. So I will pass it off one more time to Kelly and Josh to talk a little bit about our voter registration efforts on campus.
Yeah, so because we're a partisan organization, we can't actually run the voter registration drives on campus, but we've been involved still in getting them to happen. We have been a point, like Gabby mentioned, it's student assembly that officially puts on the voter registration drive, but we've definitely been a point of college or a point of contact between the college and student assembly in the town when getting these voter registration drives to happen, because we know who to talk to in the town and how to make these happen. So yeah, we've helped student assembly has put on, it hasn't happened in a while because of COVID, because they used to be in person. Betsy McLean, our town clerk, would come to campus and set up somewhere on campus. One happened at Collis, one happened at one of the house centers, and students could register right then and there to vote, which was great. And what we would do as a partisan organization was we could like stand at other points around campus and tell people that there was a voter registration drive going on. So we would go to like the library and be like, you should go to Collis right now and register to vote. So we would help spread the word that way about voter registration drives and help people in general on campus, let them know they were happening. Something else we did to help register people to vote, even when the voter registration drives weren't going on, was we would like get a group of students to sign up and we would walk them to town hall to register them to vote. So that was also something we did that was more like with our members and people adjacent who were like on our email list or new club members. But that was another effort we made for voter registration. And it was also something that was really big in the fall of 2018 when Gigi Gunderson was working as the campus organizer and had a lot. That's when I first got involved canvassing around campus. We would go walk around with clipboards and ask students, are you registered to vote in New Hampshire? And just spreading the word that students are allowed to vote in New Hampshire. This is how you go sign up. This is why you should vote in New Hampshire, and having those conversations with students. So I think those are the main things we've done in terms of voter registration. If you want to add anything, Josh, go for it. But then otherwise, we'll open it up to questions.
Think we're good for questions. Although I see a question from Barbara about grad students. That's a really good question. If anyone wants to tackle that.
Yeah,
If not,
grad students have not typically been involved in Dartmouth Dems, but they sort of get encompassed in our outreach efforts because we approach people who are walking around, and when we go knock doors, like the graduate apartments are within our typical door knocking radius. So they don't come to the meetings, but we see them and make them vote.
Yeah, so I think we will continue to field some of these questions. Thank you for taking that one, Riley. If people want to raise their hands and say their questions out loud, we could maybe start with some of those. If anyone has put something in the chat that they would like to reiterate, you can just put your hand raising function. Oh yes, I should mention Sharon has a little bit to say about some of our work before we open right up into the Q&A. So go for it, Sharon.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to maybe let people know how far you have come as an organization, the Dartmouth Young Dems. A few years ago, I asked one of the legislators from UNH if they had regular meetings with the UNH Dartmouth Young Democrats, and they said, well, why would we do that? I don't even know if they had a town committee, but they had no relationship with UNH. And I think Dartmouth has been on the forefront of trying to motivate students all over the state in getting out and voting and creating their own organizations. I remember the Maggie vote in particular that morning when all of us stand there starting at 7 o'clock in the morning, Deb Nelson and everybody. And the football players came in their uniforms to vote that morning after football practice. So you've been an example from the start for everyone as examples for what Dartmouth College students can do in colleges around the state. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sharon. Appreciate that. If anyone else would like to raise their hand and put a question out there, feel free to do so. If not, I suppose we can go back into the chat and start to address some of the questions that were asked earlier on. Let me scroll up here and see if we had anything. Not seeing anything. I think we spoke a little bit about our relationship with the college Republicans. They typically host incendiary speakers every term to sort of just incite chaos on campus. Many of you may be aware that they hosted Congressman Madison Cawthorn, who was up here in New Hampshire campaigning for one of the Republican primary candidates in CD1. A lot of students were pretty outraged that the college was willing to host this event and that the college Republicans were going around promoting an event on our campus with a man who has been accused of various forms of gender-based violence and sexual assault by many different women, and has also on the record made several homophobic, sexist, and racist remarks. There was actually a student-led protest outside of Moore Hall where the event was being held the night that it occurred, and the Dartmouth Democrats were there in full force, doing our best to peacefully demonstrate our disagreements with the congressman and general outrage that the college was allowing this event to take place. So currently don't have much of a relationship with the college Republicans. I know there have been efforts in the past to host events with the two groups or begin having conversations. But unfortunately, with the current leadership in their group, we don't believe that that is possible or even safe for some of our students who have been threatened and disrespected by members of their organization. So doesn't really exist right now. But I see a couple questions in the chat here, so I will address those. First from Martha, how do you think your experience with Dart Dems will carry forward into life after Dartmouth? I've spoken a lot already, so maybe someone else, maybe one of the seniors who's figuring out next steps in life would want to address this one.
Yeah, I'll take it just briefly. And this is really just only a side corner of it. But as a lot of you guys know, I worked for Biden out in Colorado last year and I hated it. It was 3 weeks. It was really painful. And it was nothing like the experience I'd had with the Dartmouth Democrats. Like, this is, in my opinion, the best place to organize, to do political work with really exciting, motivated people. And it really creates a high bar. And I think that's part of the reason why I felt underwhelmed by that experience, which on paper looked really good.
Sweet. Thank you, Josh. Prescott?
So because I did a lot of work inside of high school, I wasn't completely sure when I was going into college if I wanted to do college Dems. But like since the first meeting, like there's just been like this like energy of like a supportive family that is college Dems. Like I've gotten so much advice, just both like personal advice and also just like academics and career wise from upperclassmen. And I like really support and appreciate like having this community on campus to do advocacy work in order to elect Democrats.
And just to add to that point, back when I was a freshman, back then, the seniors were 19s, class of 2019, and there were no seniors that came to our meetings. So, but just in the past couple years, I think, kind of starting with 2018, if the club's history has been recounted to me correctly, club membership has really expanded and club engagement has really expanded among students. So I think there's going to be a lot more now than there ever has been of like Dartmouth Dems alumni network. That's, I expect, going to be quite involved in all sorts of political ways.
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit about that as well. I still remember the first Dart Dems meeting I ever attended in, I guess it was September of 2019. There were probably like 100 students all gathered in the Rockefeller Center. I think we actually had to move locations because there was such a big turnout. And I remember seeing Riley down there at the podium. Sharon was there. I believe Deb was there as well. The entire state rep delegation was seated to speak a little bit about what was going on down in Concord. I think that's still one of the most formative memories I have from Dartmouth. I met a lot of my closest friends that night. I don't think I've missed more than a couple of Dart Dems meetings since that night. have formed some very meaningful relationships here, and still to this day keep in touch with those who have graduated. Like Riley mentioned, I was actually just down in DC over winter break for a little bit. My a cappella group was performing shows at colleges down there, and ran into Jenny West, former Dart Dems president, and caught up with her for a while. We have a tradition at Dartmouth called bequesting, where people leave little items or t-shirts or fun gifts to former students or to current students when they graduate. And she bequested me some fun Dart Dems president merch that I still have in my room with me. So it's really a special community, a really special group of people. It will certainly have been a very meaningful part of my Dartmouth experience when I reflect on a graduation day of all that I did here. So just wanted to, without getting too sappy or sentimental, talk about that a little bit. But yeah, I see a question from Karen.
Well, just a couple other notable Dartmouth Dem alums. I think a lot of you guys know Liz Smith Liz Smith must have been in 02, or no, maybe she was in 06, but she was manager of Pete Buttigieg's presidential campaign. And then David Imamura, who was in 07. So he just chaired, he's an attorney in New York, and he just chaired New York's independent redistricting commission, because they actually do have an independent redistricting commission. So there have been ebbs and flows. Whenever there's a presidential primary with a lot of candidates, that's a great way that the Dartmouth Dems get really, a lot of energy. But it's true that then, depending on the leadership, it can wane. And it seems like you guys have some really good leadership over the last few years, and it is paying off. And certainly, Senator Hassan can be thankful for that. And that's, I think, what we're going to be working on again. But there are certainly some Dartmouth Dems, some Dartmouth Dem alums who have gone on to do some really great work in the country.
And I just want to insert, because I know that a number of people have asked questions that are specific to down ballot races, whether it's executive council, certainly state representative, but I think executive council is particularly important. And I don't know, I know the answer, but I don't want to say it. And so Kelly, I don't know if Kelly's still on the call, but either Kelly or Josh speak to the efforts in previous elections to educate students down ballot.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that Dartmouth students are more knowledgeable about their state representative race than anywhere else, right? And part of that comes from having Russ and Sharon and Mary and Jim Murphy show up to meetings and kind of just be presences. But also, I remember when I was a sophomore, I would just saw Sharon's flyer hanging around my door. And I think that was done by someone well before I became involved with the club. So people are willing to put in the work to make sure that other students are aware of those races. And I do think they get a little less attention because they're not competitive in a partisan way. But to the extent that they influence students' lives, we couldn't be more grateful to have representatives that do care about students' rights. And they've been so receptive when people both in and out of the club have reached out to them. I think that just leads to them having a network that's unlike any other college campus.
I would say that that's true for the executive council as well, except that I know that the presence of the House reps has been a constant at Dartmouth Dems meetings, and maybe it needs to be more of the focus of the candidates for executive council too.
Yeah, it's definitely always an obstacle, just trying to educate students about what the executive council even is, what it does, why it's important. Obviously, it doesn't take too long to explain to a Dartmouth student that they act as a check on the power of the governor, but obviously getting students to turn out and start talking about those races can be a little more difficult. So would certainly love to host Councillor Cryans if he is willing to come to one of our meetings, especially around campaign time. I'm sure he would love to speak because, you know, it's true. It's important. We are fortunate to have, you know, live in sort of a blue bubble here in New Hampshire, but we have to work hard to get Mike Cryans back in office because that seat is currently held by a Republican, and Dartmouth students can actually create some change there and hopefully help flip that district in the upcoming election. Not, you know, beyond the bigger goals like we've been talking about at the top of the ballot, sending Senator Hassan back to the Senate. Gabby?
I saw a question I wanted to answer about the compelling reasons that we provide people or students to vote.
Yes.
I wanted to jump on this because canvassing and door knocking is one of my favorite things to do, especially the past 2020 primary when I was a freshman, even in the cold and sitting in our library. I love doing that. I would say for me, the top two reasons I presented people was one, you know, we live here, we breathe the air, we come to school from September to June, and this is our new place of residence. Our domicile is the official word that we've used. So I say that wouldn't you want to vote and have an impact on the place where you live? And then the second biggest one I like to say is that New Hampshire really has, and as we've seen, the power to change, since we are, you know, most recently we're a blue state, but we are a purple state by most campaign predictions. So I talk about that a lot with people and say, if your home state is traditionally, you know, majority red or majority blue, and you really want to have your vote matter, New Hampshire is definitely the place to do that. And a lot of times that compels people. The biggest issue that we sometimes face is people are just really connected with their home state and they want to be voting on, you know, local politics in their area. And we totally respect that. We say, as long as you're registered, that is our main priority. So those are just a few things I talk about with potential voters and what I like to do when canvassing.
Great, thank you. I am ever mindful of the amount of time that we've asked Dartmouth students to commit to us and that they have a meeting again at 8. And so I am going to respectfully conclude. I do think that we can take questions from the chat and continue a conversation, but I don't want you to be reluctant to come back thinking that we talk on and on and on. I know that that there is a lot to continue to discuss, regardless of whether it's about voting rights and issues in front of the Election Law Committee, whether it has to do with reproductive freedom, whether it has to do with climate change or local education policies. There's just, the conversation is a beginning, it's not an end, but I want to thank you all for joining us and conclude the meeting. Unless, Miles, did you have a concluding remarks that I just cut off?
No, really nothing beyond that. Just if we want to continue any sort of conversation, if there are questions in the chat that went unanswered, definitely feel free to direct those to Deb or to me. We're in communication a lot of the time, so I'd be happy to continue talking about those points. But
Great.
thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Great.